being of Slovakia, and I'm going to present in task number 5, filling up the bottle. So the task says, when a vertical jet enters a bottle, sound may be produced, and as the bottle is filled up, the properties of the sound may change. Investigate how relevant parameters of the system, such as speed and dimensions of the jet, size and shape of the bottle, and water temperature, affect the sound. So now we have a small demonstration to you. If I can so what you can hear, the frequency is rising as the air in the bottle gets smaller. So why is that? This small live experiment wasn't as we provided, as we recorded the experimental results. So this is how we recorded it in to obtain our results. So we had a nozzle. We had a microphone placed near to the opening of the bottle, and a water bottle. To ensure that the phenomenon doesn't get destroyed, we have to ensure that the jet doesn't touch the opening of the bottle as it enters the bottle. So this is how it looks in real life. You can see a bottle being filled up, and to the phenomenon. A positive explanation of the phenomenon would be when a vertical jet enters the surface and it hits the surface, there are these bubbles formed. And what generates the sound is the number of popping bubbles varying in diameter, and their popping is what generates the sound. And we have a further explanation of this phenomenon in appendix. So we analyzed it with a Fourier transform, and we plotted graphs of intensity, frequency diagrams. So how it looked in a why is there even a bottle when we stated that the sound is produced by the bubbles. So and the bottle acts as a resonator or a filter, and it filters out multiple frequencies. And as you can see on the spectrogram, some frequencies get enhanced and some of them are lower in intensity. So here you can see a bottle being filled up and a spectrogram which is evolving in time, and the lighter the color, as you can see, is the higher the amplitude, and you can see more lines that are increasing in time. So what we did from our spectrograms, we used a program to pick up the points and in order to put them in the graphs to analyze a bit easily. So you can see many changing frequencies. So what are they? We are going to analyze them. So the first theoretical model we use are the standing waves. We use a standing waves when the air is oscillating in the bottle. It creates a node on the bottom of the bottle and also in the neck. So a half wave is formed. Due to the fact that the neck is the area of the diameter of the neck is smaller than the diameter of the bottle. So we fitted the curve. We fitted our experimental data, and okay. So this is one of our first graph that I showed you is the half wave. What is the second one? The second theoretical model we used to explain this phenomenon was the Helmholtz resonator. So this original formula for the Helmholtz resonance accounts for a this is our bottle, and this is a mass which is oscillating. This is the air. It's oscillating as such, and we had to put a time dependence in our formula in order to analyze the graphs more easily. But we have to also add an end correction. We also have to put an end correction to this theory, because as such, the mass oscillates a bit more than it has some big it has a bigger bigger L than it covers. So to see the intensity profile which of the two theoretical models that we use to explain, we see that the Helmholtz resonator is 50 times more stronger than the half-wave, and those two giant peaks that you see there are the noise from the bubbles, which didn't get resonated or didn't get filtered by the model. So the relevant parameters as the task says to explore. These are the ones that we are going to explore in this presentation, and the other ones are in appendix. The neck of the length neck is a really important parameter for the Helmholtz resonator because it accounts for as I stated, the mass which is oscillating in the neck. So we change the neck length by adding a variable, and we should affect the Helmholtz theory. So these are the two measurements that we've got, and we can clearly see that both of them fit their theoretical curves quite well. So we can conclude that that a phenomenon is affected by neck length. Next, to the shape of the bubble. This is more complex than it looks from first sight, but we took three different bubbles, and as you can see, they are quite different in shapes. So we record sound, frequency time graph, and we look at the curve, which fits the vector ones quite well. This is for a classical wine model. The next one is another square-shaped model, which also is quite well represented by their theoretical curve. And the second one is a bubble with a wider neck. And as you can see, it also fits the theory quite well. And so we can conclude that the frequency dependence doesn't get affected by the shape of the bubble because all of our experimental data fitted their theoretical Helmholtz theory curves. To the temperature, as the task says, we used the 10 degrees water and 50 degrees water because that was the maximum that we will get provided in our from our nozzle and from things, so we couldn't vary that much because we wanted a constant flow rate. So these are the two experiments that we did. The orange one is the one with the lower temperature, and the blue one is with the high temperature. When you look at it like this, it seems quite messy, and the error bars are quite big because of the spectrograms, and it was harder to obtain the data from them. But when we the 50 degrees is quite shifted afterwards. Why is that? It's because of the temperature, or because of the speed of the sound is dependent on the temperature. From this simple empirical formula that we use, we put this into the Helmholtz theory and fit it with these experiments. It looks also messy, but we take a close-up, and as we predicted, that the 50 degrees theory is shifted upwards from the point of view of the 10 degrees theory, and also the data points. So we can conclude that we predicted the trends, and temperature affects the phenomenon. To the flow rate, as I stated, we were doing our measurements with a nozzle provided, just normal nozzle that you can find anywhere, and we put these two maximum values that we can get from our things, and they fit their theoretical curves. So we can conclude, we put them in a frequency volume graph, and they look really similar. So we can state that the flow doesn't depend on the flow rate because the results are really similar. To conclude, we showed you experimental apparatus. We showed you some spectrograms and some videos of the bottles being filled up. We showed you a spectrogram analysis and also some positive explanations of the role of the bubbles and also of the role of the bottle. Then we showed you our first theoretical model, which can be applied to the higher frequencies, the half-wave theory, and the next one is the Helmholtz resonator, which fitted for another type of curves. So we have to use both of the theories. Then we explored relevant parameters such as neck length, the shape of the bottle, and also how the temperature accounts for this phenomenon and transport this phenomenon. Then we look at how the flow rate affects the phenomenon, and here is some appendix review, which are the other parameters that we could, or other things that were occurring in this phenomenon. And the first that I would like to emphasize is the creation of the sound bubbles. Also, there are some further recordings and spectrograms which we can show you in the discussion, I think. And that's all for me. Thank you for your attention.
I'm Andrew, and I'm from Macau. And I want to ask you, are you sure the jet is passing through the middle of the molecule?
How I ensure that the jet is
passing through the molecule? We showed 10 page here.
You mean at the beginning, as I explained, that as the jet enters the bottle, it has to.
Are you sure the jet is passing through the middle of the molecule?
Yes.
The
whole phenomenon is about bottle being filled up, so I don't know where you're getting to.
So in the experiment, are you sure the water jet is vertical?
How do I ensure that the jet is vertical?
Yes.
That I just turn on the nozzle and let it fall on the water. Let it fall to the bottle.
Your video.
My video, one here.
Next we'll talk about in the discussion, and can you move to page 14?
14. Yes.
We still through a lot or an anti-lock. So B2
is smaller than the B1.
The red point is a lock or anti-lock.
It's a node. As I stated, there are two nodes. There one node created here, and node created in the bottom.
And what do you mean by noise from bubbles?
Sorry,
what do you mean by page 19?
Yes.
What do you mean by? Okay, we'll move on.
This is the popping of the bubbles as I talked about the presentation.
Here? In Macau, and we'll talk about the problem number 5, which is filling the bottle. And the problem statement is when a vertical water jet enters a bottle, the properties of sound may change, and the parameters is the speed and dimension of the jet size, shape of the bottle, or water temperature. So here's the outline of the presentation. They have observed the phenomenon in the experiment with changing the frequency, and their theory including resonance, which is standing wave, and harmonic resonance. and they including the bubbles, popping of bubbles, and the splash of water. And in the experiment, they change the size and shape of bottle, water temperature, and volumetric flow rates. And here's the pros and cons. They have good time management, qualitative and quantitative analysis are present, and they have clear experiment setup, sufficient theory to explain the observation, and they're connected between theoretical results and experimental results are made. And the cons are lack of parameters such as the different dimension of the water jet. They did not mention clearly about the control variables in the experiment, which we'll talk about in the discussion part, and some missing graphs and error bars. Frequency time graph on different temperatures is missing, and they did not mention the origin of their error bars. They did not mention how the flow rate is varied. Did you change the dimension of the jet to achieve this? So here's comments and suggestions. In their theory, they should consider the frequency of bubbles bursting, and they should also consider the fundamental resonance instead of harmonious resonance only. And the experiment should be done more like they should change more parameters like the speed and shape of the jet should be considered. And later, talk about the discussion, and we'll talk in the theory, we'll talk about the harmonious resonance and formula and equation, and we'll talk about the results. So how did you get your results start to 0 Hertz? I don't know. And the experiment, they should done more experiment. The parameters should be done like diameter and shape of the jet should be considered. And in the experiment setup, we will talk about the experiment setup later in the discussion part, because I found that the experiment setup have a great mistake. Can I go to? So I want. Can you show your video my experiment setup? Page 11.
Page 11. Why do you want to see this?
From here we can see that your water jet is not vertical, but you have a degree.
Oh, I think it's just a video not being filmed like this, but like this. I think it's just the roll of the video. I may show you another video which looks, I think, a lot less confusing than this one.
So
I think like this.
May I ask you, you hold the tube by your hand or what?
I think it was hold by hand.
So how did you control the experiment?
Not in the experiment, it was just for the video, I think.
Okay, so...
Yeah, in the experiment that we had a holder and we had the nozzle fixed with fixed height to go from the body.
So I think the program statement said that it should be a vertical water jet, but obviously the reporter didn't do it, like control the variables. So can you show how do you ensure you hold the tube by your hand and it is vertical? Like, do you have a dimension?
No, it's just on the video, but as I stated, the whole measurements were done by holding the nozzle above with the holder and ensuring that it's vertical as you were asking.
So can you go to the experiment results?
Which experiment results? Well, to what parameters, or which slide, or?
Every slide. The graph you...
I don't know.
You go to the graph. Yes. How did you get the
error bars?
Results?
Starting
from 0 Hertz.
No, that was just a. As you record the sound, you get a visualization by spectrogram, and so the data points are just picked up by the program, which we programmed, and it was that the more intense points, which is the lowest, with the high amplitude, were lighter. So it was programmed to pick up the points for us.
Why it is 0 hertz? Because
0 hertz because
yes, why it is 0?
it's not 0 hertz.
Like it's starting from 0.
I think because it's a bit shifted, because the scale, the scale has to go up to 2000.
So if you consider the stretch of one jet,
Sorry?
stretch of one jet, like entering the
Pressure, okay.
stretch.
Oh, so splash when the jet enters the surface of the water that is already in the bottle. Or can we draw it because I'm quite confused.
Like the bottle is here.
Yes.
And you put this in the water
Yeah,
jet,
very
and
simple. Yeah.
if it's entering, you have like this stretch. Did you consider it?
What is this one?
The stretch of the
Splash? Okay, so yes.
This is normal. Why is your experiment result is starting from 0 hertz?
I'm not saying it's starting from 0 hertz. I think it's starting from, I don't know.
But it's showing.
I don't know what you're saying.
So,
There
did you
is
consider
a
this
splash.
stretching?
Yes.
You consider it?
Considered it? Yeah, we you mentioned that it changes the phenomenon?
In this phenomenon is producing a high frequency, so I don't know why
so
you have this result from your experiment.
I think this one wasn't. I think you're aiming to the fact that it could change the phenomenon. But I'm saying that or something with frequency, because in this graph you can only see the frequency which is changing over time. And there are also many different frequencies in the spectrogram or original spectrogram.
This frequency changing with
Yes.
time is actually from the ear.
Yes.
So
and it's also
if it is from the
from
experiment.
other experiments.
If it is from the experiment, like it would be like this and like this. This is where
no.
is the phase pressure.
These are the points from our experiment, so I think we didn't observe anything like the draw here.
So when water splash, you get a star. So why is your result starting from 0 hertz?
I'm not saying it's starting from 0 hertz.
Like if it is not 0 hertz.
I can show you some spectrum now.
So can you explain why your frequency is starting from like so low point?
Because the Helmholtz resonator works as such.
That is from the theory. Like if you have this experiment like this, here will produce a high frequency sound because of the splashing.
Yes, but the program picks up.
And if the water is provide enough cushion like this, the water level is here, and the water like this, it will reduce the
I think we did.
force.
I think we did.
Okay. So, could you
And also
provide,
it's
can you show page 33?
this one.
Yes, could you provide a temperature frequency graph?
Temperature frequency graph. No, it's frequency time graph because these are responsible spectrogram.
So,
And there are two measurements that are put in one graph in order to compare them.
so can you move to page 40?
40.
40.
40, yes. This one.
Can you explain the field points at the end?
The free that's because of the uncertainty in the measurements. It wasn't as easy to pick up the points from spectrograms. So I think that the points are just they're not a big deviation.
Okay. You move to your experiment setup.
This one.
So, where did you try different position of your microphone?
Positions?
Yeah.
Yes, and we were doing it as such that the microphone is closer to the bottle as it records sound that is coming out of the bottle, not the background noise or or some noise from the nozzle.
So did you consider the diffraction of sound?
Diffraction of sound?
Your record sound is including diffraction of sound.
Why? Can you rephrase the question?
Like, if you when your sound sensor is here,
Yes.
and the sound is like from here to go there. And
Yes.
if it is like this, so
Yeah, so
here
the-
is have a diffraction
Yeah, but
of
the
sound,
sound
which you consider.
sound waves are going. No, yes, I drew it too much. But yes, it was somewhere around here as you want.
So I want you to move to the here to my mother. Your the north part.
This one, output?
Yes.
Yes.
I think your theory part is have a quite mistake,
Why?
because here you think here is a not right.
Yeah, because we predicted, we confirmed it with our experiments. So I think the halfway theory is applicable.
But
for
here
this
should not be a knob because there will be
But
air
you're drawing an
vibration
open
here.
cylinder.
So
You're drawing an open cylinder. So in open cylinders, it would look like a floor wave. It would go like this. And here would be an antinode oscillating as such, and here would be a node. But this is the case for a bubble.
but if you like this, you also like this.
No, as I stated that this is with a
So
cylinder,
here it must not be
and
a
we have a
knob.
bottle with an action. And
So-
are you asking for end correction?
So
or?
did you try different shape of your bottle?
Yes, we had a
Did you
specific.
consider this shape with no neck?
That's not a bottle. Yes, but it's a different situation because there are different forms of standing ways for me.
Did you try the bottle with no neck?
This is you're asking the same questions, and
So what do you think about the
this is
record?
as you can see that this bottle has a wider neck. So from first point of view, we can, as you're saying that if I try the bottle with no neck or with open neck, that this bottle can actually we experimented with it and we saw that it formates a half waves in it.
Thank you. Time for the summary.
In conclusion, it's important to investigate enough parameters like the cup and the harmonic resonance. For the harmonic resonate is not enough to prove this phenomenon, and they have not including the splashing in the phenomenon because the splashing is the reason why it produces a high frequency, and they show no evidence that they control the experiment. Why is it? What the jet is vertical? They did not show us, and we think that the splashing of this phenomenon is producing a high frequency. So I don't quite understand why the experimenter is starting from a low frequency, slow frequency. Thank you.
Okay. Dear report, please open slide number 36. And until that, dear opponent, in your speech you said the phrase clear experimental setup. Could you clarify this? What does it mean? Quick answer.
You just
What means clear experimental setup?
just the photos show
Okay,
us.
okay, I understand, thank you. So, did you pick your points manually or with some kind of script?
No, I stated that it was a program, and as you record spectrogram, you have
Okay,
some
thank you.
vectors.
And how did you estimate those errors?
Those errors were from.
Please open another picture which. Oh,
Are you asking for these errors? Yes.
oh, no, okay, that's how.
It was from the precision of the program picking up.
Oh, yeah, okay. And those green and the yellow lines and all of the lines during the report, are they fit to the how you formula?
No, they're theoretical
Theoretical curves, right?
theoretical values for these. For
Okay.
experimenters.
So you have no free parameters in your system? Yes?
When you calculate those theoretical curves, no.
Okay, thank you. So another question to the opponents. Again, during your speech, you said about the frequency of bubbles. So what does it mean?
Like the bubbles have a natural frequency and
Natural frequency of their collapse or
bursting.
yes. Okay. How do you suppose that diffraction will influence the phenomenon?
Because the different position of the sound sensor will affect the record
Okay.
sound.
And what are the conditions to use the diffraction?
What can you
Which conditions should be applied to get the diffraction? For example, what should be the what should be the length of your bottle? Okay. Dear reporter, what are the conditions for the when the Helmholtz formula can be applied? What assumption should you do to use that formula?
Oh, we have to have the bottle with a neck and
Well,
and
what
the
are
area
their
for-
assumptions?
I'm stating to you that it has to have a neck and it has to have
And
volume where
their
it
relations isn't important.
which
The ratio between, for example, the length of the bottle and the length of the tube.
Stop it here. It's time. Time is up.
ratio.
Filling up the bottle. So, first, let's make a summary of the report. So, the qualitative part of the report, I think, wasn't enough comprehensive. So, the reporter said that the sound which is produced is because of bubble collapse. I quite agree with her, but also, the phenomenon occurs because of bubble collapse, because of the water to oscillate, and the water surface acts like a membrane. And also, I quite agree with the standing wave explanation, but it wasn't introduced in their theoretical model. Like the Helmholtz formula allows us to calculate the only one frequency, but as we saw on their experimental data on the spectrogram, there is not only one frequency, and they weren't calculated. So about the theory, I quite agree with the usage of Helmholtz equation. But there should be some assumptions for that, for usage of that equation. Like the volume of a neck should be much smaller than the volume of the tube, which wasn't in their experiment. Like we saw, when they used a long tube, the volume of the tube was kind of the same as the volume of the bottle. That's might cause the divergence. So about the theoretical model, I think that one of the disadvantages of the theoretical model was the neglection of a jet's cross-sectional area. For example, as they showed us, their white tube, its diameter was about 2 or 3 centimeters, and on another video, the diameter of a water jet was about 1 centimeter. So obviously, it wouldn't be neglected. Also, the length of neck determination wasn't explained. For example, when they took one bottle, they didn't determine which is the length of of neck. So about the position, I think that the main disadvantage of the position was kind of low periodized discussion. For example, for the first, the opponent started from qualifying questions like the entrance angle, the splashes of water, but during his discussion, he jumped through all the parameters. Like from the first, in the very beginning, he talked in the qualifying questions, then about the experiment, then about the graphs and the theoretical data, and then again about the experiment. And it's quite bad because it's quite hard to follow the discussion. So also, some topics were not relevant. Personally, I think that in this problem the experimental part was quite good, but the theoretical model should be discussed more. And also about the summary, some of the topics of the opponents weren't clear, like clear experimental setup and some others one. And also there were no opinions on raised topics. For example, on his topics about entrance angle and the other ones. So now let's move to discussion analysis. So the first topic was about how does the angle between the vertical and the entrance water jet influence the phenomena. Personally, I think that those angles will not have any significant influence, and the reporter's experimental stuff don't think this angle will be. Also, we discussed the splashes on the to the bottom. I think that it will have any influence only at the beginning of their time. Yeah, thank you.
So once again, I want to thank the opponent for the discussion and the reviewer for his remarks. So I would like to state, because I've been criticized for not enough measurements, not enough experimental predictions or wrong setup. But if I want to compare the relevant parameters, I wanted to compare just two measurements because I can't put more measurements in it because I have this frequency time dependence. So there, it might look like I have made only few measurements, but as to say the truth, it was over, I don't know, 100 or something with different parameters stated. So I don't think this was a valid point from both of the sides. Also, there was the point with that I forget about the area of the jet, but I was comparing in my graphs. I was comparing the flow rates, and the flow rate contributes these. If you talk about the flow rate, you talk about the area of the nozzle and also the velocity. And what I did was to change mainly the velocity of the jet, and also I varied this one, but it was changing two things at once, so it might seem as I wasn't doing any experiments with that, but it's not true. And also I've been criticized for the Helmholtz resonator theory, but the Helmholtz resonator in a sense is that as the bubbles get filled up, the volume of the air in the bottle is lowering down, and as the function for Helmholtz resonator, for the frequency function for Helmholtz resonator, is 1 over volume. So the function works as such. So thank you.
Questions from the jury? Yeah.
It showed the spectrogram of this. Yeah,
Do you want
this
to
water,
speak
yeah.
private?
Spectrogram. Just the spectrogram where you show all the frequencies.
This one?
Here, yeah. Is the splash visible here?
This wasn't actually the spectrogram which I used to analyze, but it was a nice video to see the changing frequencies.
Yeah, but I'm asking whether you can see splash in this spectrum.
Splash? No.
Splash here.
No.
And maybe the reviewer can see a splash. Watch. Splash of water.
I think yes.
I think the splash will produce a high frequency and
Yeah, and can you see this frequency?
I'll show you the property.
Sorry?
Yeah, can you show what it is? Yeah? Just at which value? Yeah?
so I think at the beginning the frequency should be significantly high. And it will go and will follow the resonance frequency like this.
The question was open. What do you mean under the fundamental frequency? What do you mean under the fundamental frequency? What?
The fundamental frequency is and this equation is for the bottle with no neck, and the harmless resonance is for the bottle with neck.
Could you go to number 12, please? Number 12, next slide. The one with the, we had the spectrogram with the fitted line of the Helmholtz resonator and the standing wave. That the next one.
Okay.
So one where you plotted, you fitted some graphs to that. Just go.
This one was for Helmholtz.
Yes, that one.
And this is this curve.
Right. So at the top, at the higher frequencies, there are two more.
Oh,
Good.
they are the,
What are those two?
the higher harmonics of this half-wave.
Okay.
And I'm making sure some graphs for. Oh, I don't think I can find a nice one, but they are the higher harmonics of the half-wave.
Can I see the spectrum again? The movie?
Yes.
Can you let it go?
Yes.
Can you play the movie again?
Yes, there are these. This down there.
There are some more frequencies.
Rising.
Do you have an idea that there is right in the middle?
Oh, that's
There is some
some.
kind of frequency that is decreasing. Do you have an idea? That's around 1,000.
I don't know. I can see that one.
So right in the middle,
Like in the middle.
from the right to the left.
This one?
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Do you have any idea what that could be?
Increasing. I think it's just well, because of the background noise. It doesn't have anything to that we observe.
Could you just go to the other slide that you showed me earlier, please?
This one?
Yeah, just the next one where you say what the two things are. So my question is to the reviewer. Reviewer, you mentioned that she didn't take into account the half-wave model in the theoretical modeling of this. Yet both of those are indicated in the graph. Is that? Am I missing something?
I said about that Helmholtz formula allows us to take the frequency, or only one frequency on those diagram, and this wasn't explained here. Or what do you mean about Helmholtz?
So what is the one in yellow?
Question on me?
Yes.
This one is the Helmholtz resonator, as I stated later in the other slides.
Time is up. Okay, so we have to go for the next. Six, seven, and 5, 5. The marks for your position. 4, Okay, so for the report, we had some lowest 5 and some highest 7. Would somebody like to give a comment on
Maybe
that? Yes, please.
Generally, the presentation was very good. I like it. Yeah? But during the discussion was, there was discussion about the splash. You had this, you could show it. Because it was visible on the spectrum. It's high frequencies. Yeah? This bright line with the frequency. Yeah? It was visible. You could show it and just have the discussion and proceed further. Yeah? And even if I ask you about it, you couldn't show it.
For the highest 7?
Well, I think it was a pretty good. Also, when you list a few points, you didn't predict the high harmonics in your model as you can review a point there. So you had the harmonics, yeah? But you didn't have any predictions in your model. I understand the question. The listening was happy with the presentation. The discussion probably was on the lower end. But I was happy with the presentation.
I was right in the middle, and I have to say I rounded up. But the main thing is you had some frequencies, you explained them, and then it's very difficult for us to judge whether there would be something more, what you have done is fine. And at some point, the deviation could possibly be a little bit better explain what are the assumptions that you had and why they did not match with the temperature. But I have to say, for me, that was actually okay, so the basics are done. Then for your position, we had lowest 4 and lowest 3 and highest 5.
I can explain my 3. First of all, 0 for the questions because the questions were too few and the questions were irrelevant. We can't understand what do you want to know from the reporter. After that, the application speech. For the application speech, it's only 1.5 because there was no prioritization. First of all, talk about the good time management, but it's not in the high priority. Of course, we should discuss in the application speech physics and topics about the discussion. And after that was the discussion. I can say the discussion was not brilliant, of course, because in my opinion the discussion was chaotic. Also, there was no prioritization, and I cannot find the line of the discussion. What we want to know all the time was about the splash. After that, only one good thing was about the high harmonics. Of course, it's good, but it was on the last second of the discussion. So, in my opinion, you should discuss it in the beginning, not in the end. So, because of this.
Comment on the highest one? Yeah, I thought it was fine. I think that's the fine is not a word we want to use. I agree about the questions, and it was sort of the same thing. You kept asking about the splash and the splash and the splash, and it was kind of, there were other things that were more important that you could talk about. But in general, I think your discussion of the presentation was good, and your discussion with the reporter was not so good, and that led to a 5. So then you have the review. That was my lowest 5. I actually was at a 5.5. This time I rounded down. I was not very convinced with the questions you had right at the beginning. And then for me, it was sometimes
we could actually try to structure it in a much better way. And then I was like just checking what I had before, and I had a highest 7 and a 5, and then for me it was more or less the same level, and that was the reason why I rounded down. Highest 7.
Well, I think I like that she picked up a few things, the assumptions and the economic faults model, and it was right that the wrong name the volume interval at the bottom. And also he picked up the standard-based model missing with no predictions. So there were some important things.
Okay. Are there any questions from side of the team? So then I would like to thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.